Our gospel reading today is from Luke 21, 25 through 36. There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on the earth distress among nations, confused by the roaring of the sea and the waves. People will faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud, with power and great glory. Now when these things begin to take place, stand up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Then he told them a parable. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is already near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Be on guard so that your hearts are not weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and the worries of this life, and that day does not catch you unexpectedly like a trap. For it will come upon all who live upon the face of the whole earth. Be alert at all times, praying that you may have the strength to escape all these things that will take place, and to stand before the Son of Man. This is the word of the Lord. Well, today is the first Sunday of Advent, in which we look forward to, with anticipation, to the coming of Christ, as we prepare to celebrate the birth of the baby Jesus. Traditionally, however, Advent does not begin with the birth of the baby Jesus. It begins with a great pronouncement. A pronouncement that the resurrected Christ will come again at the end of time. First, there will be many frightful troubles, but then God's kingdom will reign in its fullness. And Jesus gives us a way to have hope in this ultimate context. Look for his coming, for in him will be your salvation, and you will be a citizen of God's kingdom. All those troubling times will be past, and all our tears will be wiped away, and there will be no more suffering. Well, you know, human beings have an amazing capacity to envision even ultimate things, even the end times. And our vision extends to the future and how to live in hope. In hope we have the courage to anticipate a positive outcome in spite of troubling times. And I would like to suggest that Jesus' teaching about this remote, unfathomable future actually does have a significant lesson for us today in terms of how we live our lives in hope, especially in troubling times. We can live in hope, and if we don't have hope, we live in despair. So let us opt for hope. You know, ourselves are storied selves. In recent decades, there's been a lot of emphasis on how the nature of human beings involves narrative and telling of stories. If somebody asks you about your nature and who you are, what are you going to do? Probably you're going to end up telling a story about yourself. We are storied selves. And one pastoral theologian spoke of part of our story being our future story, and how our future affects our present. So I want to talk about how our future affects our present today. Think of deadlines. Everybody has deadlines to meet. I have a deadline every Sunday. I have to have a sermon no matter what. So on Monday morning, That following Sunday is the future with a deadline. And you know what? That future, which isn't here yet, it has an impact on my present, even on Monday. It causes me to have to organize my time in order to get the job done. And it causes me to figure out how I function to get the job done. Every person who writes has a uniqueness, and every person who constructs a sermon has a uniqueness, and you have to figure out how you're going to do it that fits you. So, my future deadline affects me every week of my life. We all have these, and it all gives us a pressure. You know, you have to give a report to the boss. You have to fix the problems with the product to meet a deadline for production. Here in the church, leaders of small groups have to get your lesson ready before the small group meets. So we all have to organize our time and figure out how to get the job done because of the future and how it is impacting our present. Now, sometimes we don't like that. And one of the ways we respond to this future pressure is through procrastination. Now, I know none of you procrastinate about anything. I certainly don't. So procrastination is one way that we make it harder on ourselves than it would have to be. And the future's playing a role there. You know, I grew up in a family where we were last-minute people. And if we were going to go somewhere, our preparation would have us being there at the last minute. Or get in that car and have it drive real fast to get there. Well, you know, I grew up that way and it just seemed natural to me. And so I've got to be somewhere at a certain time. And so it's just as natural to me to put off preparation until the last second as anything. So what I found myself doing was having very anxious drives to get somewhere. And it's miserable and it makes me grumpy. Amy can tell you that. So one day it occurred to me, gee, wouldn't it be nice to have a pleasant, unhurried drive? So I started thinking about maybe preparing sooner and leaving sooner. And then I can have a pleasant drive and be in a good mood. How wonderful. Well, that's more like living in hope. That I could do that. So I would like to invite us all to live in hope by looking for the coming of the Lord into our deadlines and futures that are always impinging upon us. For the word of the Lord can help us figure out how to organize ourselves and figure out how we function in order to meet those futures. And so, actually, how we live our lives every day with all those futures impinging upon us, that's really a spiritual. And now think of busyness. Much sense of busyness often involves our little futures impinging on us all the time, our little deadlines impinging. And you know what? We feel like we're running out of time. And then our vision of the future collapses, and what we anticipate in our busyness is just more of the same. Yuck. Just more of the same. And so the present in our busy lives can become like an endless treadmill, and we can't get off. So in our busyness, look for the Lord coming into your life in the present. The Lord can calm your rushed feelings and renew your soul and replenish your time and give you a new vision of the future because it helps us put things back in perspective. And then think of relationships. Our relationships have a future dimension. They're always going somewhere. And when we live in hope, we anticipate a positive outcome. But if we live in despair, we anticipate a bad outcome and live in fear. We may fear being abandoned. We may fear being hurt. We may fear being disappointed. And so look for the Lord coming into your relationships and live in hope. For the Lord can help us grow in trust. And the Lord can help us grow in taking responsibility for our part in the relationship, even as we let the other person be responsible for their part, and we don't control. The Lord can help us anticipate meaningful possibilities and work to make them happen. So look for the Lord to come into your relationships. And then think of endings. Endings are another future part of relationships and life. Now, if relationships have a future opening up before us, they also have endings, and many endings are because of death. In loss, we grieve, but we do not lose hope. So look for the Lord coming into the ending of your relationships, for the Lord will show us a new future in God's kingdom. And we have lots of little losses too. They're all out in front of us. Losing a job, losing a home because you had to move to a new town, losing the ability to do something that you used to love to do, losing a dream that no longer seems possible. We grieve all of our losses, but we do not lose hope. Look for the Lord coming into all of your losses, your endings. For the Lord can help you gain a new vision of a new future. Think of the world that we live in today. Given what's going on in the Middle East, the world can feel a little apocalyptic today. It is troubling times. So how can we live in hope and anticipate a positive outcome in today's troubled world? You know, our leaders, they tell us don't live in fear. And then at the same time, some of our leaders want us to send thousands of troops to the Middle East right now and have a new bloodbath. We need to pray for our leaders that they drink deeply of God's wisdom so that they may know how to lead justly. And we should all look for the coming of the Lord into our troubled world. And perhaps one way that the Lord can give us hope for the world's future in these troubling times is by giving us courage. May God give us courage to face our fears about terrorist violence. May God give us courage to envision and work for a just future. May God give us courage to stand as one people and not be divisive, so that we can face boldly whatever threats come our way, so that we can support one another. Now think of that ultimate future, the fulfillment of God's kingdom. If all of our littler futures impact our present in such big ways, does that ultimate future of God impact our present today? Well, I think it does, but in a different way. Most of what I've been talking about are all these pressures and having to do stuff. Well, I think that the fulfillment of God's kingdom to be all in all has a different kind of effect on our present. It is the kind of effect which says, relax. Let everything go. Be calm. Find some contentment in the present. Find meaning and beauty and joy. And you know why? Because God's got it covered. In our one of our videos in our youth program, it was about John Calvin, and he was always writing, and people were always asking him, why are you writing so much? And he would always say, God's sovereignty, or sovereignty of God. That's all he said, sovereignty of God. And one thing it meant was that God's got it covered. God's in charge. God's promises will not be defeated. God will be all in all. And so we can relax. In the midst of all our troubling times, we can relax. We can find contentment and just let go and be in the present. Isn't that a wonderful feeling when you can just let go? And oh yeah, it's all there. We'll pick it up again. But for the time being, it's such a relief. I wish this whole busy Advent season could be like that for us. I know it's really busy. But just keep in mind that God's future impacts on the present in ways that bring us meaning and joy and acceptance of ourselves and acceptance of others and peace. And that's a great way to live in hope. So we Christians proclaim a message of hope in troubled times. And I'm glad that Advent begins not just with the baby Jesus, but with the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. So, looking for that Son of Man to come into our lives with the promise that redemption is near, it keeps us from just celebrating the birth of Christ as a sort of past remembrance. We celebrate God coming into the world. And we have hope for the fulfillment of God's kingdom at last. So as Jesus says, be alert at all times, praying that you may have the strength to escape all these things that will take place and to stand before the Son of Man. Amen.